Hey everybody, I'm Bruce from WaterBear. Now, are you very serious about your music career and do you need a little bit of help with your career strategy? If so, you're in the right place because we do videos like this week in, week out. Now, my career goes all the way back from the early 90s right the way through to today, where we do things very differently to the way we did things in the past. So what we're going to be doing is taking all that great learning from the past and all the great stuff from now and the future, combining it to maximize your career right now. So let's get going. Now, this subject is super close to my heart because I come from a little town called Scarborough on the northeast of England, and the music business looked like something just from another world. It looked like a bunch of clouds. We had no idea what was going on, but we did know how to put a gig on. And I'm going to tell you the story of one gig that changed everything. And I think without this one gig in my local town when I was 17 years old, I wouldn't have had a career. In a fit of wild optimism, my band is called Little Angels. We booked the local theatre, which had a capacity of about 1,000 seats. And we committed to a large financial spend and we didn't have the money. So we'd hired the place and we had to honour the contract, and then we had to fill it, and we had about a month to do it. So this is one of them times when you're faced with something that kind of looks impossible and you've got two choices: either give up or have a crack at it. So thankfully we decided to have a crack at it, and we then embarked on the most ridiculous series of guerrilla marketing tactics. And it was everything from literally was a guerrilla marketing, because we had a guy in a gorilla suit giving out leaflets in the town centre. We fly posted the whole town. We then wrote to the local paper complaining that a band had fly posted the town. Obviously that was written by us. Then we wrote letters in our own defence and had a whole correspondence happening over a period of about 3 weeks, entirely concocted by us. We then rang up the local paper and said the police had threatened us, fined us £40,000. Local paper came out. We're on the front page of the paper taking down a poster. We then went to all the local businesses and got a sponsored page of ads. So at the end of the day, we had nearly 900 people show up to this gig, and the population of Scarborough is 50,000 back then, most of which are retired. So it was kind of, 1 in 50 people came to the gigs. Now, that was different times. There's more going on these days, there's more gigs, there's more competition, but the principle still holds true. You can make a big fuss and you will get noticed. It's all there for the taking, and actually in some ways it can be a real advantage to starting out in a small town. So let me give you some tips to get you started. Tip 1, play to your strengths. It's really tough to make a noise in a town like Brighton or London or New York or Chicago. Those big cities are very, very competitive because you're competing with the world's biggest acts, international acts. But in your local hometown, it can be all about you. So dominate that space and take over that landscape. Be the #1 band in your town. So maximize your profile in your local town. Now, chances are there's not that many live venues, so you've got an opportunity to hammer the venues that there are, and also be creative and play in unusual spaces and make sure everybody gets to hear about it. So guerrilla marketing is really important. It doesn't cost much, but I've started to see bands logos in chalk on the pavement, for example. Fly posting always works. Little stickers on pedestrian crossings. All that stuff is great. It works. Local press works. Anything you can do to make a little bit of a noise, almost to the point of it irritating people, that's what you got to do. Get your name out there. A great advantage that you've got in a small town is there's not as much going on. If you take Brighton today, there's 40 or 50 events going on tonight. It's really hard to cut through that noise. In a small town, less going on, less for people to do, easier to get people into the gigs. You've got to look at your project, and if you can't gain an audience in a small town, you're going to really struggle in a big town. So if it's not happening, you've got to really look at your quality, go back to the actual band, the music, the branding, the image, and make sure that it's good enough. Tip number 2, set national and international standards. I actually think you'll find it pretty easy to dominate your local scene. And for some people that's enough. It's that local hero thing. But you reach a glass ceiling pretty quick. So where do you go from there? Well, you've got to be competing. You've got to be looking ahead and competing with the biggest bands in the UK and the world. So you've got to set those standards even though you come from a small town. Bands find this really hard to do because it's hard to quantify what good means. And I remember when I was growing up in Scarborough, I was totally clueless about what sort of clothes would look cool. you know, and I was totally clueless what a good record meant. When people said your band has to get better, what did that actually mean? Now, big bands either instinctively or knowingly understand this stuff. So let's break it down now. Let's start with the music. Now, there's a lot of good bands out there, but because there's so many, hundreds and thousands of bands that are pretty good, that's not good enough. So we've got to elevate your music to be really, really great and stand up there against the biggest bands in the world. So maybe you might need a little bit of help, and this is where I've always talked about some mentorship. That's what WaterBear do, but the right producer will really help. Lyrics, subject matter, the direction, the sonic choices you make on that record, the production aspects are all going to have a bearing, and you've got to have that level of sophisticated cool that big bands get. So that's a research job and finding the right mentors, and make sure you don't isolate yourself and stay in your little town. You've got to go out to see festivals, you've got to go and see gigs, you've got to hang in big cities where there's cool clothes shops and all that stuff and absorb some of that culture. Otherwise, inevitably, because art reflects life, your band could have a little kind of provincial, small town, school band kind of vibe to it, which obviously is the kiss of death from getting out of that scene that you're in. And one of the advantages of bringing in some kind of mentor or producer is that therefore you're holding yourself to account. You're saying, yes, we are going to set these national standards, and you've got someone with some objectivity, perhaps outside of the band, who's got the license to push you quite hard. And what we're talking about here in old-fashioned language is A&R, artist development. And a really good A&R person isn't there to tell you what to do. They're there to bring the best out of the stuff that's in the band, bring the great stuff to the front. You know, and that's probably about two things: asking the right question at the right time to test you, make you think in a different way, and also putting environments and situations in front of you that force the band to grow. Okay, now we're going to talk about something a little bit controversial. The fact of the matter is, bands from small towns have a hard time looking as cool as bands that grow up and live and breathe in big cities, simply because the people in the big cities are surrounded by a faster moving culture. There's more clothes shops, there's more gigs going on, there's more people with cool haircuts walking down the street, and you tend to absorb that stuff. So the danger for us, and I'm including myself in this, when we come for little towns is we can come across looking and sounding actually a little bit provincial. So how do we deal with it? Well, we can either avoid it and pretend it doesn't matter and find out that it really does, or we can deal with it. Now, if you employed a stylist, this is what they'd do if they were good. They'd look at you as an individual and look at your musical project, the band, and they'd try to make the most of the good stuff that's in the band. So for example, if you're comfortable wearing a black hoodie, let's have an amazing black hoodie with the right logo on it, cut really well. If you're comfortable in a black leather jacket, let's have an absolutely incredible black leather jacket, you know. The cut, the size, the brand, all this stuff, attention to detail really matters. So it's a job of work. Do the research, make sure that you're looking at the band objectively, and make sure you do compete, not at a local level, but a national and international level as well. Tip number 3, export that local success and turn it into a national network of fans and contacts. So you've got to start somewhere. Draw a map, work out the nearest big town to you, and I would suggest that you start there. Take what you've done on the local town, take that blueprint, and now apply it to the bigger city. So if you've done all the work that we've been talking about in tips 1 and 2, you would instantly now be able to go to a bigger city and be a credible contender. From that one larger city, then you go to the next one, and in that way you hop around the whole country, gradually building up a solid network of audience and music business contacts. And many bands find this step a little bit scary, going out that comfort zone of their local hometown, and that's where they stay, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose, but I know that you guys are more ambitious than that. And the way to think about this is quite simple, really. It's like a franchise. If you can do it once in your hometown, then you can reproduce that in the next town. If you can do that, you can duplicate it in the next town, and that's how careers are built. And I'll leave you with one final thought. At some point, you're going to need a little bit of help gluing all this together, and I would go back to our previous video about management, self-management, and also the management consultants who do such a great job helping you coordinate all this activity. So once you've got a network around the whole country, then you're going to have to start thinking really carefully about building a team for releases and that whole 360-degree thing with the artist in the centre, management, releases, your own label or record labels or whatever it is, the whole universe will come into play at that point. But the great thing is you'll have done the groundwork, you've got all the foundations for scalability and developing a career. So let's get going. So thank you for listening. I've been Bruce, you've been brilliant. Stay tuned for more videos like this, and if you're finding that music's becoming a very serious part of your life, don't forget you can do this type of work at WaterBear, either in the context of a master's degree or a BA honours degree. You can study online from anywhere in the world or with us here in the heart of Brighton. So pick the phone up and let us know, we'd love to hear from you.